Holding my newborn baby in one arm, her cries muted by the rain, I once stood on the brink of a house I believed would protect me as my toddler hung to my leg, perplexed and silent. Susan Monroe stood stiffly across the porch, arms crossed, lips hardly moving as she whispered, "There's no room for you here anymore." 9 days separated me from my delivery. The house on Laurel Creek had white paneling, wraparound porch, newly mulched flower beds, like a magazine cover. It had been vacant for years as my in-laws moved between houses. I objected when Mark, my husband, advised we temporarily remain there in order to cut expenses. "I would rather rent something little," I said to him. "Somewhere we can be by ourselves." He gave his head a shake. "Clara, their house is this one. They are not making use of it. They will be delighted, we are giving them another grandchild. I promise you." I wanted to start believing him. Noah just 3 and another on the way, and I yearned consistency. Still, something in me shivered at the thought of sharing their roof, even when they were not around. Susan maintained a reserved tone right from beginning. "Keep the flooring spotless. Don't force the back door, it's stuck. Tuesdays are when the gardener visits. Don't call off." She said nothing of a welcome. By 7th month, things started to fall apart. Without asking, I paid for minor repairs, leaky faucets, a cracked window pane, hoping to be thanked. Still, every weekend they went and checked the house. She observed something every time as well. "The toys your son owns shouldn't be put out here. The microwave has a smear on it. Was that present before?" Every visit the air grew heavier. What ought to have been considered shelter as surveillance? And Mark, he had come home weekends as well, but instead he fell into their rhythm instead of protecting me. Laughing at James's tales of stock returns, you nod in agreement to Susan's passive attacks on clutter and energy expenses. And I prepared. I polished. While my hips hurt and my tummy grew, I scrubbed spit up off my shirt sleeves and attempted to keep Noah amused. Their longtime housekeeper, Lucia, arrived once a week. She was watchful even yet friendly. She murmured, "This house has always been cold," once as she dried dishes next to me. Even in July. When I did at last deliver, it was a haze of suffering, stitches, and tiredness. Mark rested 2 days. He was then gone once more. 9 days later, I was still bleeding when Susan showed up in the kitchen doorway carrying a file folder with her typically austere expressionless face. "We need you out by the end of the month," she said. "For Airbnb, this is prime season. The property calls for thorough cleaning." I looked at her, not sure whether she meant business. "I just had a baby," I said. "You seem to be healing really nicely. There is no wrath here. Nothing shouting. Just that, cool, precise, administrative." Mark continued, "Maybe we can talk to them," but his eyes were already down. And I was aware as well. We were about to go. And once more I would have to carry it. There was gradual and cruel packing. Every 90 minutes I nursed the infant, then I bent to fold clothing. I rocked her in the other arm while carrying boxes with one. Noah did not grasp. He started to cry when I pulled the drawings he had taped to the refrigerator down. Nobody participated. Twice during those 2 weeks, Susan went back to check light bulbs and inquire about rug stains. She never asked about the baby once. She did not once hold her. She once stood outside while I crouched to water the front yard, her voice piercing the silent air, "Don't let the hose sit too long on the grass. It will wipe off the grass." I was sweating, losing milk, lightheaded from heat and sleep deprivation. And she only saw the grass. Mark tried, in his own manner. He made 1 cup of tea. He packed 2 cartons. He stated things like, "Almost through it," and "Just hang in there." I did not, however, want tea. I sought shelter. Involvement. Love grounded in spine. I stood in the empty kitchen, now echoing and frigid, last night. Noah pulled at my shirt. He questioned, "Why is Grandma always mad at you?" I did not respond right away. "Because she doesn't know how to be soft," I said then. I wanted to warn him that fear can hide various masks and that some individuals love by means of control. But he was still quite young. And I felt quite worn out. Mark silently loaded the trunk. As I screwed the automobile seats in, they creaked. The heavens turned a hazy gray. Rain started to caress the windshield like a gentle warning. Susan stayed indoors, not saying farewell. She looked, though, from the upper window. Not because of what it was, but rather because of what it lacked. The picture burns into me. Not a sad thing. Not guilty. Only distance here. I said, maybe only to myself. I didn't leave because there was no space. We were pulling away. I left because I at last realized there was nowhere for me here. I had never felt more alone, even with him at my side. And at that same instant I understood, home is more than just four walls. It's who says, "I've got you," when you're bleeding and opens the door. None of that applied to me. I so discovered how to say it for myself. The phone rang precisely as I was ladling porridge into Noah's bowl. Thick with humidity and silence except for the sweet coo of the infant cuddled against my chest, Saturday morning was gray. Mark gathered. Before he spoke, his face transformed. "Dad passed out," he murmured gently. "Outside the rental. Mom wonders if it might be a stroke. They need someone to sign for intake even though they are headed to Mission Hospital. She came to ask for you." He avoided looking directly into my eye. I did not reply immediately away. I worked the oatmeal till it turned cold. The infant whimpered, its fists jabbing against my collarbone. Noah knocked over a little milk container. Nobody spake in a word. That was always how it was. I fixed it when anything broke. Something broke, I bent to try to keep it together. City Asheville's Mission Hospital located downtown. I arrived still wet from the evening before, early in the morning. Susan was pacing beneath the ER awning, her beautiful cardigan fighting with her panic. Her hand held her phone so firmly that her knuckles had become white. She hardly greeted me. She neglected to say thank you. She handed me a copybook just now. She said, "They won't admit him unless a local relative signs." I am not reading anything. I agreed on everything. A nurse dropped by and picked it with a trained smile. Inside, James rested in a curtained chamber. He was conscious, sharp, even attempted to joke. The doctor stated, "A small clot." Susan stood next to the bed, staring with a familiar expression that screamed control through anxiety. At last, she murmured, "Thank you for coming." Though her voice was gentle, it did not reach her eyes. I nodded softly. Then, though, the words arrived almost on their own initiative. "I bled through a pair of jeans while dragging Noah and a diaper bag out of your house. I confessed the day I gave birth." Susan blinked. At the time, nobody signed anything for me. Nobody to find out whether I was all right. Just pressure to be out before the listing went active. She seemed like she wanted to talk, but the quiet hung too heavily. "You assume I harbored resentment," I said, but I did not. "I just recall everything." I turned, then moved silently outside. I never waited for a response. I was not interested in one. Mark watched the infant sleep next to me on the couch that evening, arms encircling her. She said nothing. Not pertaining to his father. Not about me getting called, not about him. Only silence. Still, for the first time in weeks I felt light. Not due to things being better. But I had stopped looking for them to be. I signed for what was required. When others could not show up, I did. And I did it not for anyone else to see. I did it since that is the person I had evolved into, the one who shows up. Not for thanks. Not in search of pardon. Still, for peace. And when it came time to go to sleep, I dreamed of none of that house, Susan, or the chilly way they discounted me. My own front porch, cozy light in the windows, and the gentle sound of my children breathing peacefully next to me were my dreams. I didn't need them to atone back then. I only needed them to remain. But it is too late now. There were weeks. Not one call. No conflicts at the front door. Just the lengthy, silent calm that nobody dares to go back over following a confrontation. Then, opening the front door on a cool Saturday morning, I discovered a plain brown paper bag folded twice at the top, laying on the welcome mat like a question mark. Inside were 12 still warm snickerdoodles, my favorite, and a clean, familiar handwriting note, "I won't ask for forgiveness. I really only hope for a chance." None of a signature. I did not, however, need one. Noah pressed his face to the screen door behind me while I stood there for a long time and the infant cooned on my hip. I set the table for 3 that evening as the sun sank behind the maples out front. Not 2. Not 4. Merely 3. I omitted explaining it to Mark. I wasn't needed for. He turned to look at the third plate, then back at me and said nothing. He had no need of it. Susan arrived in town early the next morning. I watched her through the curtains before she rang. She skipped stepping up the porch. She watched Noah pedal his tricycle in large loops on the gravel driveway behind the gate. She looked like someone practicing what she wanted to say, but she forgot the lines. I stayed at home instead of going out. But that Sunday night I left the front door unlocked. Not grand announcements. Not even background music playing. Just the quiet creak of the wooden step outside, the gradual click of the knob, and the long stop before the door opened. I did not get up. I turned not to look back. But I heard it, tentative footsteps, the sound of a coat rustling, the slight catch of breath. Still warm on the stove was the soup. One cannot turn forgiveness into a switch. Neither a poetry line nor a dramatic scenario exists here. Not for the person who injured you, but rather for the part of yourself that no longer wants to carry the weight. It is the calm, deliberate decision to leave a door unlocked. Susan left not very long. She sat perhaps for 5 minutes. Did not talk. Just glanced at Noah, then the infant, then the dish before her. She then up, nodded once, probably only to herself, not to Mark, not to me, and left. Softly behind her closed the door. I refrained from crying. I simply glanced down at my children and realized, let them remember this house not by what it cost us, but by how I made it feel like home. She deserved it, hence I did not forgive. I was done letting them own even a single inch of my serenity, so I forgived. And the day we moved out of their house, I touched the photo frame with our first family photograph as I walked to the mantel that evening. Noah stood holding my hand in the rain. I was carrying the baby, my back hurting and my shoes soaked through. We were, nevertheless, smiling. Not only because it was simple, but since that belonged to us. I laid a hand on the glass. Once more, I was the one opening the door. You learn to live with some wounds since nobody else cared enough to see them. Then one day someone comes on your door, too late to correct anything, yet just early enough to cause you to feel everything all over again. I had no resentment towards Susan. But if I claimed not to have created a quiet fortitude within me to survive her, I would be lying. Her departure from cookies at my doorstep was not dramatic. It lacked fanfare or floral decoration. Just sugar, warmth, and a line of ink stating more than an apology ever could, "I won't ask for forgiveness. I really only hope for a chance." It was the flashpoint I understood. I stopped waiting for her to declare her mistake. Since I had already ceased depending on her to be right. As I have discovered, forgiveness is more about you than it is about them. It is not about discounting what occurred. It is about remembering without reservation. You have made peace, not because they have changed but rather because you have. I did not let her in via the door. I left it unclosed for myself. I set that third dish not because I wanted company but rather so my kids might learn what grace looks like. Not every nasty word, every cold supper, or every time I cried behind a closed bathroom door will be remembered. Perhaps though they will remember the soup. The friendly nature. The way silence was let to be expressed. The day I was advised to depart, my story did not finish. The instant I did started it. You can only build the one you really need after you have moved away from what you considered to be home. Mine lacks glossy flooring or golden chandeliers. Still, it's safe. It's soft. It features unbounded laughter not quantifiable. And love free from any conditions. I never the kind of woman that slammed doors. I learnt to close them though. More significantly, though, when should one reopen them? To the people who have offended us and come back silent instead of ashamed. We see you, the mothers-in-law who meant control but called it kindness, and the husbands who looked down when they ought to have risen up. Remembering is difficult. But the weight is no more with us. Our trade has been stillness for shame. Bitterness against limitations. Suffering in order to find peace. For healing is not loud. It is the least noisy revolution. And the last act of recovering your story is forgiveness. Therefore, if you are still waiting for someone to apologize, perhaps this is your indication that you need not wait anymore. Right now, the door is open. Leave of one in the comments below should this narrative speak to you. And, if not yet, subscribe to Soul Time Reddit. Until they heal, we will be here sharing the painful stories.